Why is it that two different people can consume foreign language learning content for the same amount of time, while one progresses dramatically and the other one barely improves at all? They're watching the same shows, listening to the same podcasts, even reading the same books. So what is the factor that dramatically determines whether you make progress or whether you just go round and round in circles? After thousands of hours of learning different languages to different levels, I've noticed something fascinating. The biggest leaps in my foreign language abilities didn't come just from finding better content or spending more time. They came from a subtle shift in how I approached the content that I had already been consuming for quite some time. It's like the difference of just looking at a painting and really seeing it. The painting itself doesn't change, but your relationship with it completely transforms. This realization is what led me to begin to understand what researchers call active input, and why it might just be the most overlooked factor in language learning altogether. Active input is essentially the difference between watching a language and having it just wash over you and fully engaging with what you're consuming on a much deeper level. Think of this difference as playing some music in the background while you wash your dishes or walk your dog, versus going to a beautiful concert hall where you close your eyes and you focus on every single note you hear. Both technically involve listening to music, but only in one of these activities are you truly hearing every piece of the content. Active input means dedicating significant mental focus to understanding the message or the specific aspects of the language that you are listening to. It's doing comprehensible input, but it's taking your cognitive spotlight and turning that volume up all the way to 11. Okay, so let's jump into active input with some more specific definitions and specific examples. But before we do, if you're interested in taking anything you learn in this video and applying it to yourself with a day-by-day, step-by-step program, check the link in the description. All right. Active input can actually take multiple forms, but they all share the common thread of being very engaged with the content that you are listening to. For example, you might sit down with an entirely Korean interview of your favorite K-pop star and focus entirely on understanding every word of the Korean dialogue. Or you might listen to a French podcast where you are specifically paying attention to the words and how they blend into the natural patterns of French speech. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that you understand every word, it just means that you're making an effort to understand every word. Another example is that some learners will try and read Spanish news articles while trying to take every word that they don't understand and understand it through the surrounding context that they might already have knowledge of. Basically, the key is that your brain is not multitasking. It's dedicating its full processing power to trying to extract meaning from the sounds that are entering your ears. Now, this differs a lot from what researchers call passive immersion or passive input. Again, that could be having Spanish radio on while you're cooking dinner or out for a walk. Now, passive input is not useless, but it's like trying to fill a bucket that has a tiny hole in it rather than just opening the floodgates. It's worth mentioning that your brain is always trying to decode messages, whether it's passive or active. It's always making an effort to do that. However, when you're doing active input, you just give your brain richer context to do it with. Here's a framework that I find helpful. Think of your brain as having two processing systems that are actually running at the same time. The unconscious system is quietly analyzing patterns, and then it's using this analysis of the patterns to build a mental model of how the language works. But on the other hand, the conscious system kind of acts like your data gatherer. It can deliberately focus on specific features, look up unfamiliar words, or use context to make educated guesses about meaning. Active input is essentially when these two processing systems come together to work harmoniously. You're not consciously trying to learn grammar rules. Instead, you're consciously focusing your attention so that you can feed your unconscious pattern recognition component of your brain the highest quality data possible. Now, this concept actually extends far beyond language learning. I think we can all agree that we live in an age where our attention is fragmented, scrolling through social media while watching a TV show and texting a friend. But what if the quality of our attention itself fundamentally changes the quality of our experience? When we give something our full focus, whether it's a conversation with a friend or a book that we're reading, or a language we're trying to absorb, we are not just being more efficient, we are actually accessing a deeper level of understanding that simply isn't available when our minds are scattered. Again, I'll remind you that if you want to learn more about these concepts and how I use them to actually acquire languages, take a look at the link in the description. Here's what surprised me most about active input. Some of the most effective active input happens when you choose content that's just above your level and then actively remind yourself that it's okay to not understand everything and just relax into the fact that you won't. It reminds me of trying to stare into an optical illusion, forcing this image to come out, instead of just relaxing and allowing your eyes to kind of just coast until the image emerges. The most beautiful thing that I've found about active input while I've been studying what it actually means to do it is that it takes language learning from being this chore-like activity and turns it into a kind of meditation. When you sit down and really listen to that Italian podcast or watch that Korean drama, you're not just acquiring a language. You're practicing a kind of increased attention that is very rare in our world today. So the next time you're engaging with your target language, I want you to try this. Close the other tabs and put away the distractions. And then just listen. Really listen. You might be surprised by what you discover. Now look, different people have different ways they prefer to study languages, but if any of this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about your experiences with active or passive input in the comments below. I read every single one of them, and for the most part, I respond to every single one of them too. And speaking of active engagement, your brain is about to actively wonder what happens when you take all this beautifully acquired input and it doesn't turn into output. So if you want to have the answer to that question, how to turn your input into output, then you might want to check out this video right here, because this is the video that YouTube thinks will help you the most. See you in the next video.